So I guess the short version is fell asleep while I was driving, crashed into a tree, and that part I have no recollection of whatsoever. And then I remember myself being out of my body in the white light, not going into the white light, looking down at my body that was leaning against the tree, and a police officer was crouching over me. My experience was very kinesthetic and emotional feeling and physical feeling. Just it felt like the perfect summer day. I love summer, so it's, not too hot, just the perfect temperature and just feeling really nice. There was a sense of kind of knowing everything. And I realized recently I've been saying and kind of knowing nothing because I didn't need to know anything. It wasn't like there were any questions. So everything was, even saying everything was answered isn't true. It's just because there were no questions. It's just everything was good. Behind me, even though I wasn't facing that way, I knew there was a big white, different color white kind of cloud, and then a white being that was shaped like a person, but kind of white with gold kind of around it. And the being said to me, "You have to go back. Your father wants you to stay." I knew at that time that the father the being was talking about was my spiritual father, not my physical father. Later on, and I had no idea what to make of it. Like nowadays, people talk about near-death experiences. I had never even heard of it, or I know that phrase was coined around that time, but I didn't know anything about that. When I started to, probably the biggest thing that happened was I needed to find out what happened because I had no idea what to make of it, and I started meeting spiritual teachers and healing teachers. When one of them started to talk to me about Mary actually first, and the love that Mary had for God, and that she could let in the Christ energy, I go, wow, that was my experience, like how I felt. And when he started talking about Jesus, just the way I felt inside and the images I got in my mind was that being behind me was Jesus. And the other phrase he used was the ocean of divine love and benevolence. And it was like, wow, that was the white light around me, just the feeling of it. And so when it happened, I had no idea what to make of it. I went back into my body. Sometimes people say, did you have a choice? I didn't, again, everything just seemed so perfect and right. I didn't even, there were no questions. It was just like, yep, and I went back in my body. I came to 3 days later, and the doctor, I remember the look on the neurologist's face just telling me I'm lucky. I assumed lucky to make it. One of the nurses, I still remember specifically saying it was touch and go. I didn't get any answers from the doctor about medical stuff, if I had flatlined or anything like that. My dad did come in when I was, about to be in surgery, and he said your skin on your scalp was peeled away, and he saw inside my brain.
Wow.
Yeah, that part was intense. But after that, I started to meet a lot of really interesting, mystical, magical people, and just something in me just needed to know and find out about death. I started studying the Tibetan Book of the Dead and different, more traditional things about dying and what happens after we pass away. Before that, well, I was born in a Jewish family, so my heritage is Jewish. The religious aspect of that, some of it I don't quite believe, but not very much, to tell you the truth. I didn't really think of that. I was, a math and science kind of logical person, and I was a little interested in psychology, but I didn't really have strong religious beliefs at all. But it did, believing in Jesus is part of the Jewish tradition. So, but I also learned a lot about the Islamic religion that I feel a great connection to also, a lot of, So what I've been recently saying is not I'm no religion, I'm all religions, because the major religions all have this really wonderful, loving connection to God and to spirit and all things. I mean, even in the Bible, they talk about, Jesus had a near-death experience pretty much. He died, he went to heaven and came back. Just pretty much the same thing happened to me. So. Yeah, you might offend some people, but there's the loving essence of the major religions is very similar. And, not to say that it has to be, like some people connect to that through Buddha or through Allah or through, Abraham and the Jewish religion. That love that comes through God and the supreme God or whatever you'd call that is kind of part of most the religions I know of. That's there, So.
Yeah.
So when I'm working with someone, it's good to find what that path is for them. So sometimes people don't know, but so then I have to try to either, if I don't know intuitively, it is try to ask them what their religion they were born is, because a lot of times, even if they don't like it, that is their kind of pathway to connect to God. It was very gradual, actually, because again, I was always kind of intuitive, and but I did notice the first thing that was very obvious was my hands became very warm when I touched people, and that was kind of the first clue. And it's my perspective is I would never even believe any of this stuff. That's the thing. So whatever I was experiencing, even that, I had doubts about it, but that was a very obvious thing, because when people hurt, I could touch them and my hands became warm, very warm, and they would feel better. So there was no denying that part. Like I said, I started to meet spiritual teachers that taught me things, healing teachers, just my own I want to say curiosity, but it was more like a drive to understand the stuff. And so I learned, I studied, I have my doctorate now, and that's part of it. And still I study, I talk to other people that do healing and learn from them and do a lot of reading. And it's interesting, because someone said to me the other day, it's like, oh, it's too much work to become enlightened, or just the way they said it. I go, you're never enlightened. It's in the process of getting there. And right then I was thinking, looking back however many years ago, I'm thinking, wow, compared to then, I can do so much more now. And I was thinking, wow, thank you to those clients that used to see me. Even though I've helped people a lot, like now it's even way more, and what I can see. It's very cool.
Yeah.
Well, that part's very important to know. And, even when I see things, sometimes I don't know exactly what it is. And just to not have my mind try to jump on it and define it. Because in one way, by defining it, it's small. And this is just really big and, infinite. So that's a very important part of the process. Yeah. That is a good question. So generally, our higher self is kind of located right above our head. But the first way we connect to it is in our heart. So you can start to imagine energy in your heart center and allow it to expand. Okay? And then just with intention, there's this kind of light thing, like a ball. The high self a lot looks like kind of a ball of light, or it might look kind of like us, but kind of light. And you can just use your intuition. So, like when you see someone that you don't know and you feel a connection with them, a lot of times it's your high self seeing their high self, and you just feel like you want to connect with them. The work is really done with intention, and we kind of use our imagination, but to differentiate between our imagination and this part, we call it our creative imagination. So we're creating things. Okay, so some people in the audience are starting to do that. So you can imagine your high self as being like a spiritual master, and that will help you connect to that also. Part of the answer to the question is there are different things we connect to. There is our high self. We do have like an inner master, and there are masters and angels and saints, all things like that all around us. In one way, it doesn't matter exactly what we're connecting to. We want to trust that the thing that we need at that time is going to come forward. So a lot of times, I mean, there are just thousands of these things there. So you want to have your intention for the highest good and what can serve you at this moment. So when I'm working on people, I don't really connect to my high self very much. Although as I'm saying that, there's sometimes I hear this voice tell me something and I don't know what the voice is. I've just learned to really trust it. I'm wondering. So there are saints, like Jesus is a very powerful thing. Buddha, there are one of the healing masters that work with me a lot is Imhotep, who was an ancient Egyptian, considered the first medical doctor in Egypt, but he comes in there. So there's all sorts of different healing beings around, and you want to kind of be open to what can serve you the best at that time. Well, we cannot be on the wrong path, but there are different choices of what the right path is. So I just think of a funny story of someone gambling and getting information on what to gamble on, like in a casino, and winning a little bit of money here and there and here and there, and then betting all the money and losing it. And so like a voice telling them. So you want to, on the things on the practical level, you still want to check it out. For me, when I'm looking for information with people, I'm looking for an energy shift to happen. I'm looking for either a healing on some level, whether it's emotional, physical, or even spiritual, that there's a certain alignment that happens. So when it's information, that would indicate it's right information, and it doesn't necessarily, it could be 2 + 2 = 3, and then the person just lights up and their pain goes away in their body. So that part of healing something, that's the purpose of what the information I look for. Our high self does communicate to our basic self a little more easily in a certain way than our conscious mind is always trying to make sense of things, which basically means as soon as it gets any information, it tries to compare it to things we've experienced before, and then that's not always it. So the trick is leave your mind back, and when the information's here, it's like, well, you don't have it yet. Even though our mind, oh, I see that, it means this, this, this. No, you keep letting it and letting it and letting it and letting it, even like past your eye into the center of your head, and then it's like, the information's just like a bright light, or it might not be concrete information like we have. The other thing is a lot of times the information is more in a general direction, and it is not like, people ask me questions all the time about the future, and I'm kind of reluctant to tell them, even though a lot of times I see that. Partially because there's a % chance of what it would be, plus it starts to influence people's choices and does not allow them to unfold in that way. So, the person who asked me started to connect to their high self in there somewhere, so that, that part. So even the way I talk is kind of vague, but there's the part that lines up inside. If we have too much, if it's, A, B, C, then you're going to want to, but there's an experience that goes with that. You're going to want to go A, B, C again, and you might not be honoring the experience. So that part of the experience, the part of feeling expansive, the part of feeling joy, and that part is really the priority. That person has some past lives to clear. It's not a conclusion. I just see things or know them. It's not, you don't, sometimes I have to think about what I'm seeing because it makes no sense to me, but generally I just know stuff. So, yeah. So she has a past life where she was a nun, and it was kind of hard. So we can just ask for the light to clear that. If she could just put her hand on her heart and just breathe in there a little bit, she'll probably feel it start to move a bit for her. Well, it's starting to clear. Putting their hand on their heart and breathing, they might feel it clearing. So. Yeah. There, some of it is, there's within, so in the spirit, Jesus is a very powerful being. And so sometimes when people have, especially, if they have, a lot of people don't like the religion they were born into because of what people use it for and what their parents did with it. But it is kind of like weeding out the good part, even though there's a lot of trauma around it. So it's like there's a kind of a grayish area like this, and then there's a line through the center that connects to God. And in this case, it's very thin, almost, it looks like a light. So it'd be like a whitish light that goes through there. Okay. And some of that stuff is starting to clear. So yeah, my handshake sometimes when the energy comes in, so that's a good thing. Yeah. If you find a path that's good for you and it connects, there's also a family line of energy that a lot of times people don't understand, that there's a spiritual energy that comes through our family. It's kind of like you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So the parts, like the Catholic religion is well known for making people feel guilty. And I'm interested in religion, so I study it. I've been to different Catholic churches. Some of them feel yucky, and I don't want to be there. So I've been to some that feels like, wow, there's really a lot of good light in here. But then what the priest, is that what they call him in the Catholic, is saying the same thing that the priest was saying in the other church. So there's the energetic part of it. I would not, you want to be open to whatever it is. So it could be a religion you have issues with, and your issue might be part of your karma that you need to work through. It could be, well, no, I need to go to a different religion. But there can be no religion, but the saints, Jesus, Buddha, Allah, Muhammad, Abraham, the Hindi devas, they're all real things. So it's not like what they're saying in the religion is not true. It's just what people use it for in their way, through history, to try to get power over people and control them. That part is not, the controlling part is not part of what I'm talking about at all. But there is the part of the love that comes through, and whatever clicks inside of you for that. I have something from a Japanese past life that I like to eat in bowls a lot. It's just kind of funny because I always reach for bowls and, things like that. So if there's something like that in you that kind of clicks, then it's like, oh, let me go with that. Why fight against what is true inside of you? And then if there's a part that's like, no, that's just not true for me, then, don't include that part in there, Well, all of those things come from other lifetimes. And so we're like a puzzle of lifetimes, and, some pieces of the puzzle are more present in this lifetime, but we want to look for those things and kind of, in one way, we're taught to put the puzzle together in a way that our parents told us to, but you can put the pieces together in a different way, and then it can be more fulfilling and more light-filled and, really joyful for you. Yes, you're accessed into, there are all these different levels of consciousness. I'll send the light to you there. There's some of them that are not very nice. So, we dream on more than one level at a time. That's part of it. So in the astral and causal level, although that's not the level I'm talking that you're accessed into, but in the astral and causal level, there can be very negative things and there can be positive things. Okay, and actually right now I'm talking, what I do a lot is to keep that person's attention as the light goes in there. There's just kind of a lot of dark, yucky stuff there. So we want to send the light into there. So there's colors is really one of the very strong healing tools, and purple transmutes and transforms things. There also orange sort of clears and brings in a little bit of energy, and then another thing that's important is spiritual assistance. So you could actually make a list of any of the people I mentioned so far, and there could be others that are in there. So we have, check with Jesus, you can check with the archangels. So there's something called the Great White Brotherhood that can help this person quite a lot. So some of that's clearing up in a nice way right now. So that it's, doing it so quickly, it's hard to know the effect, but a lot of the darkness is clearing up. Okay. There's a thing in her consciousness about penitence, like she has to. Is this a woman or?
I believe so.
I don't want to. Yes. Okay. So. Yeah. So the part of what came in with Jesus is the grace and forgiveness. So we're forgiven for all our sins, basically, and she can know that she's forgiven. She doesn't need to. She doesn't need to pay any penitence for things she's done in other lifetimes. So you want to forgive yourself for anything you did in other lifetimes that might have not served you or served the greater good, and you can just let that go. The thing of putting your hand on your heart and breathing can help for everyone, and your hand on your gut and just breathe in there, and then she could feel some of that energy move, it looks like to me. Yes, the light is always good. So yeah, you have a negative being affecting you when you're sleeping, so we can just ask for that to clear. So usually it's one or those two things I just mentioned, but not always. The good thing about dreams is we get to work through things in our dreams so we don't have to do it in the physical level. So that part's good. Having dark dreams is kind of a blessing, that you don't have to have dark things in your life. But for you, there's a demon affecting you when you're sleeping that we can ask to be removed. See how that goes. Yeah.
Wow.
There you go. So it looks like that just left there. Did your vision, it looks like your vision just changed a little bit. I don't know if you're seeing it, but
Really?
Spirit helps us through our positive qualities. Our soul gets expressed through our positive qualities, and for that person, it's kind of like there's a line of things that are the positive qualities, and it's okay to own your positive qualities and have them kind of line up inside of you. So it could be, even being attractive could be it, or being intelligent, or caring, or discerning, or strong, or powerful, whatever those positive qualities are. In a certain way, it's kind of part of, there's the puzzle of our past lives, and then there's the puzzle of our qualities. Now, how do we express those positive qualities? The Spirit will support us in our action, and the Spirit will not violate our consciousness. So it's giving us a very positive message, but if we don't want to do that, the Spirit will, in a certain way, bow down to us, because as humans, we have a lot of authority spiritually, because we can connect all these different levels. So it is, how do you express your positive quality and then take the next step? And sometimes you don't know what that is, and then the Spirit will come in and support you. The way I describe it is we're on like a highway with a lot of different lanes in it, and we have to be on the highway pretty much. There's just a lot of lanes in there of kind of how fast we go, how enjoyable it is, or but it, you just can't do something that's not part of it. That's all there is. Even if you're kind of fighting it, that's part of it, which kind of makes sense. But there is the message in us that of what we should be doing, and how do we get to that? Sometimes there are a lot of tricks. A lot of times in what we want is a big way that information comes in. So our soul and our high self communicate to our basic self, which some people call the low self, but I don't like that terminology, because our conscious self, our conscious mind, wants to make sense of everything. So then our basic self is almost trying to trick us into doing the right thing. And if you could listen, and it comes through in what we want. And kind of an innocent example I use, if you want to eat ice cream, that could be it, but it's not eat the whole gallon of ice cream. So what we want in a positive way, then that part of us, our basic self, is very enthusiastic. So if it gets a hint, oh, eating ice cream is the trick, I should eat the whole gallon, that would be it. But no, that's not it. And so a lot of times that first inkling of information that you get is accurate. Then all these things come in our mind comes in, well, what does that mean? Blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, that might not be it. So it is, be very conscious, take the step, check inside again, take a step. A lot of times we can see the end result, but we don't know how to get there, and that's kind of how you do it. It is kind of important to not get stuck into the high self. You mentioned a spirit guide. I'm always reluctant to even use that with people because there are things that are guides, but the angels are always there. There's saints, there's so many different things, and we don't want to get, like, almost our familiarity will not allow some of the really cool, magical things to happen, because there's part of us that our humanness wants something that's familiar. And then it's like, so sometimes there are actually spirit guides, but usually when people ask me about it, it's not spirit guides, and they're connecting to something lower than the things that are there trying to help them. Like angels is something people can usually connect to and not get bogged down in trying to make it all humanish, let's say. The answer is the thing you're thinking of as you is not the part that chooses to do this. So the part of you, when the loving energy is there and you just see something and everything looks good, that part is choosing to be, it looks at this like an amusement park, and some of the roller coasters are scary. And that's kind of what it is. So it's, you're talking about why did God create people, and there's the answer that rings true inside of me the most is God wanted to know him or herself more and love him or herself more. And so by creating these things like offshoots of God, basically that was part of it. But it is kind of like a puzzle and a game, and sometimes I can connect to that, and it's set up so I can see that with people I'm working with all the time, but I can't always see it with myself, and it's set up to do it that way. And one of the great experiences I had in my life is the person who I consider the greatest spiritual master I ever met. He was getting kind of old, so his assistant or whatever was giving a lecture, and I asked a question about this, and from the back of the room, this person who I admired probably more than anyone ever in this lifetime said, "Join the club." And it was like, what a relief that this person has a similar experience. And and I saw some of the healing work he did on other people, and I know what I can do on other people. And then to do it on myself, it's sometimes you just can't. And luckily I'm really good at working on my kids, but sometimes it even blocks that, because we've set it up so we're having these experiences to learn things. But it's not learning like we would know in our mind. It's a very deep experiential level. So, when people say, "Oh yeah, I know the lesson," it's like, no, you never know sometimes when I've passed through a lesson, it's like I'm thinking, how much would I've had to mess it up to not get through? It's not like I'm Om and everything's good. It's more like it's a struggle, and you just get through it, and that's the way it is. I do. I try to go to the place that is going to get the most bang for your buck, basically, where, sometimes I usually try to suggest things for people to do. A lot of what I do, there's sometimes things get healed just like that, and you could look at it as a combination lock with a lot of numbers in it. When a lot of them are lined up, it's easy to get the person to heal like from a physical thing like that. Sometimes they have to go through a little bit. Like sometimes I'll work on someone, and I warn people of this. I've learned how to do it so it doesn't happen that much, but really the biggest healings happen when people the next day feel worse. And then at the end of that next day, they'll feel better. And it's, once in a while I'll talk to people and it sounds very medical. I mean, that's not what I do though. I'm not a medical doctor, and I always tell people that. But usually the negative forms and negative energy, clearing that off and looking for patterns in past lives, those are usually part of the sessions I do. But it can really be anything. I tend to talk more psychologically to people, and that it's like when I work with people, I kind of see this timeline of how they can heal. And then part of it is when I'm talking is to getting them to open their consciousness up to let that energy come in. Sometimes when I'm talking, like I was doing before, I was just talking about something that really was close to what we were talking about, but just to keep the person distracted because their mind was trying to kind of stop it in a funny way. So, our pets,
Yeah.
do they feel it? I'm just trying to think of how to answer that. So it is, yes, when you okay, so part of that is you understand our attachment. So sometimes when I'm like with my daughter, she's still alive, but it's, sometimes if you have an emotional attachment to it, it's hard not to put your emotions in there. So it is almost like you, instead of imagining it going right to them directly, you could imagine it going to, like, ask Buddha or Abraham or Jesus to send the light to them or send that prayer to them. So it just kind of purifies it a bit. When you're asking about feeling, it's not quite feeling, but it is kind of getting it. So I have people, I usually, send the light to people and ask for them to be blessed. And sometimes I see them light up in the spirit. So if that does happen, yes. For pets, so with pets, it's a little bit different, but I don't know how to answer that about pets. Well, actually I do. So sometimes when I'm working with people, their past pet comes in the spirit and helps, which is kind of a cool thing. Does that person have a pet they're asking about specifically? That's what it seems like, yeah. There's a lot of light going to a pet, it looks like, so that's fine. It's things are different in the spirit than they are here physically, and even though we're trying to make it seem that way, it is more like a general loving and caring. And it's the part of feeling kind of has a physical implication to it that we would feel it that way, but when we do that, it's kind of like the light increases in that being for a moment there, and it's almost like a tickle of light kind of thing. So, yeah. If you have so sometimes when people ask me about relatives, I could see they're not, it's all very, there's no way to explain how this is, to tell you the truth. So everything is from our perception. But so this is not really accurate, but it's a good way to describe it. There are kind of different levels in heaven, let's say. And so sometimes when someone passes, they're not in the highest level they could be. And what I do and what that person is asking about can actually help them. Okay? Again, you need to leave your mind way back and not even think that what you're saying is right. It's more of the intention, or think that you can perceive that being in the way that they are, because you kind of can't, but you kind of can. So it's different. So that is a good question. Again, you're asking these questions so I have never heard that specifically, but in one way, any being that's in these levels is there's a kind of healing that goes on. Sometimes when people die very suddenly, and then there's different so there are things that get kind of lost in this level, and we can help them move on. Usually the way to do that is you can use your creative imagination to introduce them to a saint. And the first thing to check is the saint of the religion they were born into. And if that doesn't work, then you can just sort of guess. And as far as the greatest number of people on the planet, Jesus is the one that works for the greatest number of people at this time. So if you're not sure, that's a good place to start. But that Jesus doesn't work for everybody, that's for sure. It's a good way to look at it. Yeah. It's kind of like this thing that just makes everything line up, and we're kind of experiencing that when we're alive physically. Like things are moving in that direction, and there's a movement in spirit that is always there. We know in a different way. In the way during my near-death experience, it wasn't very verbal at all. It was just more a feeling, and that same way is there. We do know, and we know in the same way I was saying the spirit, our soul comes through in our positive qualities, that kind of way we know. And I think everyone has experiences where things just kind of click inside of them, then we know. Then our mind comes in and goes, oh, what is that? We want to line it up with something very concrete, and that we don't know that way, but we do know in other ways. I'll send some light there. That kind of thing. There's so the purple light is something that person can do. Like imagine purple light around them. They have a hole in their energy field, so that would make sense. They have some witchcraft affecting them. That would have something to do with it too. And there's another thing like a hypnotic that they can just let that go. So in all of the things you want to, and sometimes it's just someone else's stuff, but there has to be some sort of opening there and a reason that it's there. And not in the way, again, it's kind of like the learning the lesson. We don't know what it is, because usually it's things from other lifetimes, why it happened. So it's either we did something similar to someone else, or we submitted to that in another lifetime kind of thing. And then it's like, well, can you just look at the forgiveness, the spiritual assistance, and the colors? Those are the three main healing things. So you can ask for, I'd be curious to see how that person's feeling now, because their energy field looks way, way better. The meditation on my YouTube channel, the Basic Soul Meditation, is really good. So you want to start with very, very high beings, and keep the thing I'm saying is a lot of times it's kind of vague, the information we get, and it's more of a general feeling. And try to not go for the specific part. So so the purpose in my way I look at things is like to know our divinity, to have enthusiasm and joy and things like that. Okay. So our third eye has a few different parts to it, and we want to try to activate, if we're doing this, the top part, which is very connected to the spirit. And a lot of times it comes in it is kind of not as concrete as some people would like. Okay, so just be open to positive, good things. When we, if we want to start, so sometimes still masters and things come in for me and I don't know who they are, and part of me would like to know, but I can tell as soon as I'm doing that, I'm eliminating this really good thing from happening. I wouldn't suggest trying to see our past relatives. I would suggest trying to let in the Christ energy or energy, something comparable to that, as opposed to seeing the specifics like you're talking about. If there's a certain tradition that appeals to you, that's really fine. Like I said, when I'm working with people, I'm really looking for healing to take place and this certain opening to happen to them, whether the information is right or not. Like sometimes people say, how do you know? I go, I don't really care if the person's getting better. If you're having more happiness in your life, if things, having more abundance in your life, having more love in your life, that's the part that really matters. Remember, it's probably way higher than you're thinking. Like when I said, when people start to ask me about guides, usually they're connecting to a much lower thing than they can. Okay, so that is way, way up there. Way, 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 way up there. And that, when you do that, it's like, oh, there's that thing that just brings in this positive energy. Then our mind will start to come in and try to see what it looks like. It's like, no, don't do that. Like, just keep going higher and keep going higher. There is a way when we don't come back, and kind of, yes, like I said, the lessons are, it's good to have a teacher, to tell you the truth. I mean, I wish it was you could do it yourself, but generally you can't. But kind of, yes, there is a place where you don't return. There will be a time when humans do not return, and there'll be a different species. So at some point, everyone will make it. Yeah. Again, you asked me things like, I have no idea. So I could see if I can get information about it. But,
All right.
well, the answer is be gentle and loving with yourself and do your best to do good things, to be of service. I mean, first to yourself. You have to be good to yourself first. Take care of yourself first, and then, then your family, and then your community, and that kind of thing, and doing good things. Understand that everything that you're going through, and I'm saying this, it's easy to look at your life and say this, and it's like, oh yeah, I need to remember that too. I have a teenage daughter. She's a great kid, and she's a teenager. And it's, there's times that it's a bit of a struggle. And like I said, sometimes I get through a test and I'm thinking, really? Like, how much would I've had to mess up to not get through it? And because sometimes it's hard, and that part is important. So it's kind of like the answer to the question is in the highest levels. So there are infinite number of levels, but we don't need to look at it that way. So we have the astral, causal, mental, etheric levels, and those are they're obviously invisible, but they're kind of very similar to, well, they're not the highest spiritual levels. And above that is the soul level. In the soul level, it is like there's almost hardly anything there. When I connect into there, the first thing I do is see like a bluish purplish light and feel this thing kind of drawing me up. But in there, and in the astral and causal level, this is similar, but this is a little different. We can use our creative imagination to create these majestic, wonderful places for us. So we have a way to go to those levels where our human part can actually do it, and then you go there, and it just like, just imagine, I have a place, there's a lake and all this cool stuff. It could be in a city, it could be on the beach, it could be in the woods, just that place, and you connect to that high place, and then you start to feel the spiritual energy come inside of you, and that's what we're talking about. And that's the way to go into those more positive things that you're asking about. The thing of the NDEs is people connect into the spirit, and you can do that without having a near-death experience. So there's kind of two parts to it. The part of actually, for me, getting my head banged open, I don't ever want to do that again. But that part of connecting into the spirit and learning how to do that, and you can do that. So you don't need to have an NDE. It does help to have teachers. I can't impress that enough. But do on my YouTube channel, I have the meditation. I have other exercise to do that will definitely help. And there is a whole lot of part of realizing some of it almost like, yeah, I'm just going to connect to that high place. Like, don't worry about the who's, what's, where's, and why's. You just do it. So everyone is spiritual, whether they're aware of it or not. And so instead of thinking, oh, how do I do this? It's kind of like you just do it. But we have to work with our mind and stuff to let us just do it. But there's part of it. So that person now is connecting into that energy a lot. And the reason hearing NDE is so good is because they're connecting into these very high levels. I even say, it's like I just wasn't listening. I wasn't seeing the signs. And then you have an NDE, it's like there's no denying it because your body's not there in the way. So, if you're feeling that as, yes, I'd like to be in that place, obviously you don't want to be in the place where your body's dying, but you want to be in that place that the spirit is and do things to do that. And it takes practice and work. It's sort of like working out your muscles. You got to go to the gym if you want to have strong muscles. If you want to strengthen your spiritual abilities, you meditate. If you look at that basic soul meditation and learn how to do it, even if you do it just a couple of minutes per day, it can help a lot. In one way, I don't really need to know. It just helps sometimes if the person thinks of it, so maybe they started to. I'm just very used to connecting, doing the healing work to talking, because I'm usually talking to people when I'm doing the healing work, so it's all good. So we'll just send the light to that person. So that person something that would help is like imagine a rainbow, like all the different colors around them. That would be helpful. So then, start to see glimpses of a past life connected to that. So we can just ask for that to be cleared. Yeah, it looks like they were a laborer of some sort that the people they worked for didn't really care about how their body was. So we'll just send the light there, and so that might help. Well, we'll send the light to your dog, which it went there immediately before you even finished telling me, which is cool. So. You don't have to worry. Your dog is fine now. It was good you mentioned your dog. That's good. It's good. And just when you do, just keep breathing and letting go, because there's part of it that it just doesn't make sense, but it's better than what makes sense. The nice thing is I got a message. My daughter went over to her friend's house. She sent me a text that I didn't see till just now, right at the beginning, saying, I hope your thing goes well. It is. It's a great... my daughter is a great kid, and I'm a great dad, which is really good.